Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition is coming out on August the 31st. It's actually a free drop for everyone who already owns the game on PC. And it's an entirely new game that's coming to PS4 and Xbox One on the same day. So it's one of these big updates / port days, which is kind of a common thing now. Isn't that right, Jake Kulkowski?
It certainly is, Mike Williams.
It's just a big kind of thing that they've done before with Divinity Original Sin. The first one, that's Larian Studios, they like doing this. They like releasing the game and then about a year later kind of refining things, adding a lot of things and giving it a new kind of subtitle. And last time it was Enhanced Edition, this time it's the Definitive Edition. There's a lot of changes, isn't there? There's thousands of changes, in fact, made by developer Larian Studios. There is more than 30 hours of new content in Act 3 alone. Why is that important?
Well, the third act of the game, which is where all of your many hours is sort of led up to, fans felt it fell a bit short, or certainly some fans did anyway. And Larian Studios themselves have said that they've noticed there were certain things that they would like to change, and they're obviously obsessed with their craft because, like you're saying, with the release of the enhanced edition of the first game, you've worked so long on this game, they must be obsessing over all the little details. And Arcs, which is the place where the third act takes place, has had a bit of an overhaul, to say the least.
That's it.
30 hours of changes is very noticeable. Yeah. That's the length of a AAA game normally.
I mean, well, 3 of them, mate. So Larian Studios invited us to an event to actually see this with a hands-off walkthrough of Arcs in Act 3, which is the main kind of location in Act 3. And we got to see the developers kind of play a little quick tour of, the highlights of, just to give us a flavour of how things have changed. We actually got a chance to play it a little bit ourselves as well. We had a quick spin on it, and we did an interview as well, which will be uploaded separately as its own video, so look out for that on the channel as well. So we saw 2 versions of the game running side by side. One of them is the new game as it's going to look, the new version of the game as it's going to look when it comes out on August the 31st. The other was what?
It was just Divinity Original Sin 2 as you know it. It was being played on a controller, so you could see the same
the
prompts
UI
and stuff
kind
like
of,
yeah, exactly the same. The version, if you've played Divinity Original Sin 2 and you've played Arc, it's that version.
And you plug the controller in.
And you've plugged the controller in, of course, And then you've got the completely well-reworked version. It seemed to us, anyway, when you've got the 2 screens side by side, you pick up on this, right?
Yeah. So what we really saw in the bulk of it was in terms of like story changes and how they've changed the context of how certain things pan out, and that's where it was really kind of lightweight as far as some players were concerned, that they didn't really have enough context for why things were happening or what even was happening in you could say in some occasions. So that was really the main, as far as I could tell, that's what they really wanted to highlight to us, the fact that they changed the way the story is delivered. There's more narration, literally more recorded dialogue. And that is part of this 30 hours of extra content.
That's right. There's loads of direct story changes like that, as in like NPCs will say different things or more things, there'll be more options, but also something that Larian Studios has received loads of accolades for and lots of rave reviews in the game. It's like it's subtle storytelling. It's storytelling that's in the background, storytelling and context that leads up to events. Like you know something's about to happen in the dungeon you're entering because you notice there's a growing amount of spider webs, so you can kind of use your brain and think, there's going to be spider.
It's environmental storytelling, isn't it?
It's that, and all little story bits like that, the way the music builds up and things like that. There's changes like that as well, and that's something that we really noticed when we were looking at one scene in particular. Which involves this is the last act of the game, so I suppose we will be heading into spoilerish territory here. Well, we're trying to do it with a lack of context, so it won't really affect anybody watching. But it's the Death Fog machine. That whole build up to that is completely different. That won't mean anything to you unless you've played that, I'm assuming.
So without a context, that doesn't really mean anything. Yeah, that's right. So we'll keep it like that. The way that moment is delivered, for example, is different this time around. They've actually changed the set decoration, the actual environment design looks different. It's more obvious what it is. It's not just like a tap in a wall. It's kind of more elaborate. There's like a cinematic camera angle and everything that kind of pans around to let you see what's happening. Yeah, and it's so no longer is it just kind of one person interacting with it and then everyone in the party getting loads of XP. There's a narrator explaining to you what's happening. There's kind of the cinematic angle. There's the fact that it actually looks different. So you get all this extra context because it's a big moment in the game, and it just didn't really land for a lot of people the first time. So they've they've really changed the way that is executed. You should think about this update more along the lines of kind of a movie director's cut rather than a remaster or a redux or anything like that. It's a different thing. It's more context. It's a different way of executing the same story.
Absolutely. Like when it comes to characters and stories and things like that. So if you're aware of the game, you've played it before, you'll know you can make your own characters, but you can also pick like preset characters that have their own stories that are unique to them. So one of those characters is Beast, who is a dwarf. That's all you need to know, really. And in this place, there's sort of the queen of the dwarfs, who has a bit of history with Beast, and that's not that apparent in the original version of Divinity Original Sin 2. So you've been playing this game for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it's building up to this moment, and some people felt like that fell a little bit flat. So Beast in particular has had his story really honed in on, and they've improved that. We actually saw that where the two versions of the game were both running as Beast, going through these things, and the beats are completely different. The moments, the amount of choices and additional dialogue is hugely noticeable. Like
completely. And another thing that I really kind of enjoyed that seeing as well was the way they've changed the environmental design of things. So we were talking a little bit earlier about environmental storytelling. They've really ramped that up in terms of how the levels actually look. So in that death fog bit, there's a whole bit that's supposed to be sewers, but in the base version, it just kind of looks like dungeon. It just looks like stock dungeon. With some water here and there. In the way that they've changed it for this time around, it looks completely different. There's, rather than stony cobbled dungeony looking bits, there's actual wood. There's walkways that are made out of wood and stuff. There's loads more detail that makes you feel more like it's in a sewer. And it's that kind of, I spend so much time in games in the photo mode looking at the environment and stuff. That's the kind of thing that really catches my eye, and that was I thought that was a really good job of making it feel different and not just like another dungeon, which there's a lot of dungeons in this game. So if you want this dungeon to be important
and to stand out closer to the player, they've also changed like lots of UI bits, haven't they? Like inventory and journal and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. The journal in particular was something that we've kind of wrestled with in our co-op playthrough of it. It's kind of a traditional Dungeons and Dragons journal currently in the base build.
So this is something that like I don't have that much of a problem with, but I can see why it's confused people, because like there'll be parts where there's little mysteries in the game or little bits of intrigue, I suppose, and they're not meant to be completed. But so what I'm saying is, let's just say, like, I don't know, like there's a little story and you can figure out the story and it ends, but you were just watching it, you were just experiencing it. It's not a quest that you need to complete, it's not a mystery you need to solve. But that in the journal is right next to a quest that you can complete, and it'll say completed when you've done it. And what the journal's now got is lots of divides and lots of changes, ways of separating completed quests, archived quests.
Well, they've broken it up, like you say, to the log, which is the quest log bit, which is that's the bullet point. That's more traditional, like AAA RPG, like this is what you need to do next. That's almost entirely missing in it currently, as far as I'm concerned. It's there, but it's the way it's written and stuff is not so much instruction as isn't this interesting? And then it's up to you if you want to do anything about it, which is a mix of log and lore, which now they have divided into two sections. So there's a quest log, and there's a lore section, which has all of that colour and all that detail. And then there's an archive for the things that you've done and you've crossed off, and conversations and stuff that you've had, which all that is just mashed in together into one diary type thing, and that's what it's called. It's called the journal. It's not called objectives or quest log or anything at the moment.
Definitely,
it's called journal.
It feels a little bit more like a chronicle of events from like a tabletop Dungeons and Dragons session, whereas it's a little bit more video gamey now,
which I think is definitely, if you're going to move to console, and it sounds like you're always kind of being disparaging when you say that kind of thing, but it needs that kind of thing, I think, and it definitely makes sense, and it makes it more palatable and easier to follow. And also they've rewritten them, so they've rewritten them to say things like, maybe you should go over here, you need to go to this windmill, you need to go to this house.
That's right. And it can provide map markers now if you've been there before. So it's not going to just lead you like some AAA games will just lead you to the place, and you don't need to know anything about anything. You
this
can
isn't
just follow
Assassin's
the marker.
Creed.
Yeah, exactly. You're in such a fantastical world of all these NPCs. There's loads of them, loads and loads of them, and you might forget, who the hell is this person again? Oh yeah, it's that one dwarf who lives there. So you can easily find them, and I think it's good because RPG players a lot of the time aren't, I don't want to say completionists, but are messy, quest log is a problem. There's a lot of points of no return in RPGs and stuff like that. And before you leave Fort Joy or something like that, you might want to complete all the quests because you can get a lot of juicy experience, you know, or you might want to just experience all the story, and that'll help people who want to try and, you know, section off bits of the map, complete it all before they move on. And I think it's really well set out now, I think.
Yeah, it's a positive change for sure, I think. And whatever it is, it's a comprehensive change because the journalist is very, very different now to what it looks like in the base version. In terms of how they've changed the difficulty and the balance and stuff, one thing that they were keen to point out was that they've added the story mode, which is like this mode for people who don't really want a challenge, because it can be a challenging game, can't it?
It's certainly more challenging than the first game, I think.
Yeah,
I played the first Original Sin a lot, and they've got this armor system now, and that can be quite overwhelming for people.
The battles are almost like puzzles that need figuring out.
Yeah, because you can't just brute force your way through. No. It's not like, you know, a random encounter in Pokemon where you just click attack. Yeah. You've got to go through.
That's not gonna happen.
Exactly, and I think that going to consoles, there might be a hardcore gamer in the household who wants their, I don't know, like their girlfriend or boyfriend to play, or a family member who might not have the patience or time to figure out these battles, but they still want to experience this huge adventure.
To me, it feels like that could even cater to people who are D&D players, not necessarily video game players as much.
Yeah,
and they might want to experience this thing that the D&D community is excited about, but you know, they're just not used to video games as much, maybe, and it's an ideal setup for them. One of the key changes there is that they've added in the resurrection ability. So currently, resurrection, so reviving your downed party members, tied to a single use item called the resurrection scroll, which is very expensive. So if someone's down, you know, you're spending almost 1,000 gold or whatever. Well, I don't know. I've made that. It's a lot of gold anyway.
Yeah, it depends on your bartering skill, but it's still quite a lot of money. And for your,
I didn't want to get into the economics of the resurrection
700 golds to go right in Driftwood.
Yeah, just trust me, it's a lot of gold. So rather than spend one of them, it's now an ability, like a skill that you can just use. Yeah. So when a battle is over, maybe you've lost almost the entire party. Don't worry about it. Just revive them all and get on with it. Whereas if you did that in the standard difficulty modes, you'd have to just struggle on until you could revive them all.
Sell your dead mate's gear to bring them back to life.
Well, exactly. So that's one of the big balance changes. They've also rebalanced the harder difficulty mode, which I can't remember what it's called, but the toughest difficulty mode. Yeah. They've rebalanced that so that it's more difficult later on, because they were saying that a lot of players were finding that it was hard to begin with, but then later on it would really fall off.
Slows down,
and people were just breezing through it. So they've kind of retooled that so it's more difficult all the way through, which is huge, because a lot of these changes are for the hardcore, like, Divinity fans, aren't they?
Yeah, I've played the first game on every difficulty mode, and it's the first 5 hours of the game or so were the hard bits. But once you learn a certain set of skills, like the Liam Neeson, I guess, you then you can't get comfortable and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that'll translate to the second game as well. I'm assuming. I haven't actually played it on the hardest difficulty this time around. So yeah, good, because people that sign up for a challenge want the challenge all the way through the game, not just for the first bit. So good, yeah.
So I'll give you a quick note, if you're interested, finally, on the performance. So the build that we saw, the new build, was running on a Xbox One dev kit. They told us it would run at 60 FPS on an Xbox One X and PS4 Pro. It's going to run at dynamic 4K on PS4 Pro and native 4K on the Xbox One X, which is better. And it runs at 30 FPS on Xbox One and PlayStation 4 base models. Yeah. Okay, so just in case you're interested in how this top-down CRPG runs, but
split screen. I don't know how
and that's one thing they said as well. They tested it split screen, which is significant because you're running the game twice,
because you can't separate your players and go your separate
ways. You can go miles apart.
And,
so they got the game running nicely by the sounds of it. They've also chucked in HDR support as well, which is available to PC players as well if you have DirectX 12 and Windows 10. So that's everything we learned when we got invited down to this Divinity Original Sin 2 event by Larian Studios. It left me positive, I've got to say. Also listening to the interview as well, some interesting things came out of that, so look out for that on the channel as well.
That's right, some separate things in this. We've asked them about Solora the Squirrel, as well as the new arena mode and the future of Larian Studios. So
look out for that interview. Let us know down in the comments what you think of these changes. Are you a long-time Divinity Original Sin player? Are you looking forward to this new version of the game? Or maybe you're a console player and you're a newcomer to the series. Does this sound like the kind of thing that would be appealing to you? Let us know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. There should be another video on your screens right now if you want to watch that, and a link to Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time.